Team, welcome back to another episode on Live, Perform, Compete. I'm joined by Rich Aceves, who is one of the men behind StrongFit. Rich, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me on, man. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely. A bit of backstory between myself and yourself. I think the first time I ever heard about StrongFit was on a Barbell Shrugged episode. I'm pretty sure it might be Julien just talking about the lats for about 2 hours. And I think he just completely messed up all the guys from the Barbell Shrugged episode on a podcast in a workout. And I thought some really, really interesting principles. And round about the same time, you guys were coming over to Hong Kong. And yourself and Julien came over and you ran the coaches weekend. And I remember at the time, I don't know if you guys are still doing this, but you gave the option for anyone who's really interested to then sign up to the coaches week, which is basically, I think it was 5 days with just you two and a small group of students. And basically we just worked out every day, sat in this tiny little room, and talked about training and principles. And I ended up doing that and I had a blast. But since 2017, I've kind of just followed your journey online. I keep on hearing about StrongFit popping up in, I feel like everywhere I go in the world, and every person in the industry I talk to knows about StrongFit or has some form of connection with it. But Rich, why don't I hand it over to you now? Perhaps you could just tell us a little bit about your story and kind of what brought you to where you are today.
Yeah, for sure. So I started in the culinary industry. I always started things young, and I dive headfirst into things. I just kind of want to go full board. And so when I was 13, 14, I basically went to a 5-star restaurant and asked if I could work there. The guy had no clue I was 14, 15. That would be child labor in the US at the time. But so basically I started and I worked my way up in the kitchen in the culinary world. And I started to realize that, at that time you also start to become interested in girls. So you wanted to kind of train and work out. And so I started to get into fitness and powerlifting and the gym. And I got really into rock climbing, mountaineering. And at 18, I went for my first expedition in Mexico. So I went to go try and climb the third highest peak in Latin America, Pico de Orizaba. And as I was doing that, coming down from the summit, there was a rock slide. And so it was just my uncle and I. And so as we were trying to scramble down and not get hit, I pushed my uncle and I got basically smashed on the side by a 1.5, 2 foot, 2 meter boulder and went flying about a good 60 meters down the mountain. Spent about 15 hours or so on the mountain. I don't quite remember the full timeline, but spent quite some time just laying on the mountain. Had to learn I basically told my uncle, go down, try and get help, but, just wrap me up. And I was in sort of at a state where you just accept death. Like it's a very calm state. Like the adrenaline that takes over and everything that happens is a very, I want to say, spiritual journey, but the body does some amazing things when you're in massive amounts of pain and in massive amounts of trauma. And so I like the whole instance from the rock slide to telling my uncle that it's okay, I'm going to die, just go down the mountain, was probably about 2 minutes. And in that time frame, it felt like it was maybe like half a day. But the time really, really slows down and you're able to process everything very acutely. And so at that point, the first thoughts in my head are always, my mom's going to kill me because I died on the mountain. I told her I wasn't going to get hurt. Always a son's thoughts. And so my uncle said, we can, don't worry about it, but we're going to get you down the mountain. So that's where I kind of switched mindsets pretty quickly, where that accepting of death was no longer an option, because if I die here, more than likely he's going to die here, and I'm not willing to lose 2 people. So the switch in mindset kind of happened rather rapidly, and then it's just a matter of surviving and trying to figure out mechanisms as to how to keep yourself alive and how to distract yourself from the pain. So as you guys can see, I came down the mountain. It took about 15 hours. They had to rush people up the mountain. I mean, they were basically telling us that it would be 2 to 3 days. And we got really lucky. There was a guided tour coming down. So they found me. And then they were able to find GPS coordinates and everything and coordinate the whole rescue. So they brought up like 30 people and they started sliding me down the mountain. And I think that's really where I think life always gives you options, right? And so for me, it was like I can cry and bitch and complain about everything that's happening to me right now and the pain that I'm in, and why can't they do it faster? Which in my head doesn't make any sense because they're trying to help me out. So what's the point of me complaining? I know they're doing the best they can. So I always found humor throughout the whole thing, and I think that I still continue to find humor. But I remember this like this is like one of the most clear thoughts that I still have in my head. We're about halfway down the mountain. So I got hit at 5,000 meters of altitude, and we're probably about like 4,200 meters of altitude. It was probably like, 11 to midnight. It was dark and it started to snow, and the guys were taking a break. So they were basically like help carry me because it was all rocky, and they would set me down. And as they set me down, I was like, guys, can we hurry this up? Or do you guys just want me to walk? And obviously I can't walk. My hip broke into about 35 pieces. You know what I mean? Like walking is not an option. But one of the guys that like just didn't grasp the fact that of course I can't walk, looks at me and he goes, dude, you can walk and you're making us carry you. And so from that point on, like I tried laughing and it hurt really bad to laugh because a broken hip and laughing doesn't go well together. But it was that moment that you start to realize like as much as you're in the deep of the shit, you can still choose a much better way to approach the situation. And so that's, I think, has changed my philosophy towards life is like, what is the approach to everything that I'm going to be doing? Um, Especially when you get in sticky situations. But anywho, so I spent 5 months in bed. I was in the ICU for I think 2 or 3 weeks. Had to relearn to walk and do all those functions. So definitely a very humbling experience when your mother and your brother need to wipe your butt when you go to the bathroom, and you're just basically laying in bed for 5 months, like not even being able to sit up. You learn a lot about yourself and what you want to do. And I think at that time, I just wanted to, the doctor told me, no lifting, no this, no that, like just be happy you're alive. Like basically, you're going to have a very sedentary life. And that to me, I'm also a rebel. I was like, there's no way that's going to be my life. I'm going to prove you wrong. So I think that was another mind shift in within me that forced me to be less lazy about those things. Um, and so I just started to look up as much as I could about rehab and learning to walk and lifting weights and so on and so forth, more of the fitness route. um, and so once I started to get the okay to walk and start trying to be active again, I think I went at it full swing. Within like 5 months of me learning to walk, I was deadlifting 200 kilos again, and just doing things that I definitely shouldn't have done. I should have listened to the doctor for some of it. um, so I had to have surgeries every single year, 5 6 years back to back, just because either screws were popping out, bones weren't fusing together. So there was always kind of issues happening, and with the structure that happened, basically how could you not expect that to be so? um, so yeah, but my first inclination was going into CrossFit, and I got into CrossFit and started. I mean, who doesn't love CrossFit when you first start? You feel like you're gonna puke and die and have a brain aneurysm all at the same time, and it was only 12 minutes of training, right? So that to me really sparked an interest because I love that form of intensity. It made me feel how I felt when I was on the mountain. It made me have to have that mind switch of, yeah, this is horrible at the time, but don't disengage from the pain and you can push through it. And so the CrossFit mentality for me in that sense really allowed me to just push hard in training. And I think probably more hard than not. Um, and so I kept breaking my shoulder, my back, things would keep going out. It would get to the point where I knew exactly where my injuries were going to come. It was almost like a cyclical thing. Like, you kind of go insane because you know that you're going to get to 2 months and then that shoulder is going to pop again because you're going to hit that 130 kilo push press. And so it took 6 7 years of me having my gym and training, and then going into, well, maybe I need a coach, right? So maybe this is the time where I need somebody to help guide me because it's been 2 years where I haven't had injuries or needed surgery. Like all the hardware's out, like there's no more excuses for me. So maybe this is the time that I need somebody to help me. And as I reached out to at the time I was looking at all the CrossFit in the CrossFit world, right? All the different coaches that there were and physiotherapists. And I was just trying to find anybody to give me a solution. Um, and mainly the responses I would get, it was, you pay this much and I'll send you the programming and this will get you this far. And I would look at the sample programming they sent me and I was like, dude, that's what I do on one day. Like
Yeah.
maybe I need rest. Okay. But it was, there was no advancement in that aspect for me. Um, I knew the methods that they were using to write the programming. Like there wasn't anything new that I didn't know already about the programming. And they weren't really calling out any weaknesses per se. And so I was like, nah, that's not what I need. I would go to the physiotherapist and they would just say, stop training, or we can give you a shot. There's nothing else we can do. Like it's just your supras is always going to be inflamed type thing until you do something about it. I would go to the chiropractor and he would say, just stop trying to squat so heavy as I'm trying to qualify for worlds in powerlifting. Like that doesn't make sense. And so I was on Facebook one day and I ran across this guy and it was Julien Pineau. And I was like, interesting. And so I started seeing his videos and the training he was doing at the time, nobody was doing, right? So I loved the sleds and I was already doing sleds. I didn't have sandbags. But the sled work, the way that he approached the accessory work that he had on, so like the SOTS Viking presses and just different shit. I was like, interesting. So I took a couple of his exercises. Um, I did them. I sent him videos and asked him for feedback. And I said, hey, well, I'm looking for a coach. Um, and at that time, he had been training Val Volveroy. And so he's like, well, come meet me at the games. We'll talk about it and we'll think about it. And so I show up to the games and I was like, listen, I need guidance. I was like, I think I'm pretty strong in my field. I'm a good CrossFitter. I think I can become better. But for strength wise, I know I'd be the strongest CrossFitter if I ever make it to the games. And he goes, yeah, okay, cool. Like he wasn't really interested all that much. He'd seen me in a couple of powerlifting meets. He's like, you're really fucking strong. So anywho, he's like, come see me. The assessment's $300. You come talk to me. We train a couple of times and then I'll see if you're worth becoming my client or not. And I was like, dude, $300 and I'm going to pay. That means that's like $900 that I'm going to be paying at the time where I was a coach that wasn't making that much money already. I'm traveling 2 hours, driving 2 hours to go see you. And then you get to decide. I was like, fuck. And I kind of like that because it was a bit of a challenge of, I don't get to decide. He gets to decide because it's his time. So it really became a cool thing for me where it was like, okay, so I need to be worth your time if you want to work with me. And the first day we showed up, we had that conversation. We did accessory work that I've never done, but once you do it, you're like, I probably should have been doing this my whole life. Did some of the sled works that you saw the barbell shrug guys die to. I died as well. And, it was this kind of, he allowed me to feel that there was hope afterwards. And he just said, yeah, you need more left lat. Your left lat's not working. So that's why your shoulder keeps blowing up. And I was like, and this is like where you get your ego totally challenged because you're a dude that, I was pretty fucking jacked. Like I had, the nice Arnold V shape. I had like the whole thing. I was like, there's no way I need more lats. Like, but he was the only one that's ever said anything along those lines. Everybody else like, well, you're strong enough. Of course you're going to get hurt. Well, it's a specialty sport. Of course there's injuries involved. And so I was like, huh. And so that was like the route that I decided to go. So when I got back home, I was like, maybe I do need more lats. Like, what does he mean by more lats? Is it lat dorsi? Is it teres major? Like, where is it? So the whole week, it was about 45 minutes of working out, just trying to figure out how to connect to that left lat. And it was basically that for the next 2 years where we were just going from one thing to the other, but he never gave me the program. He just said, if you can get better connection here, the whole system, your whole body will function better. And he got me ready I realized quickly I didn't want to be going to the games because I hate running and swimming and any sort of endurance work past 400 meters. So I was like, okay, the games aren't for me. But that was the year that I came 74th at regionals in SoCal at the time where SoCal was a very competitive, CrossFit regional region. I went to the grid and I performed pretty well. Just I don't think I had enough Instagram likes or whatever it was. Um, and then I qualified for nationals and worlds for powerlifting for USAPA for USPL and USPA. And it all happened and we got there and then I had a complete burn down. So I remember like we kind of set up the season was going to be from like January and the last thing was like in April or May. And I mean, I was able to do some ridiculously strong things where you're just like, why would people even do that? Like I would do like the ladders from 60 kilos to 180 kilos, and I could finish the ladder in under 30 seconds of power clean power jerks, and just going up by 20 kilos every single time. And I could perform all this stuff, but by the end of it, my brain was just drained. Like my system was just like, dude, you're done. So I went off overseas to come visit my now wife, and we traveled around. I didn't train once. I came back and I was still just fully just blown out. Like I just didn't want to train anymore. And so, took me 3 or 4 months to come back, and then realizing how there does need to be balance in your life in order to maintain such high intensity peaks. And as that started happening, I would go see him and I would still pay him, but I would just go and it would be super light training. But at that time, I'd realized the genius that he was. And so I would just take my phone and go listen to him and record him. And so I would like question him in certain things and I would just start taking notes. Like this is before he even had the system written up for barbell shrugged or anything. Like he was just doing his thing in this little place in Torrance. And then eventually I was like, hey, coach, I really feel like I understand what you're doing here. And I see a client that has the same issues. Can I use it for my client? Like, I don't want to, like, I'm stealing your things, but I'm asking you that I'm going to steal your things. And he goes, yeah, well, that's the whole point. So, and I started applying it to my clients and I started to see my members walking straight and not having shoulder discomfort when they come in to train and not needing to have an hour and a half of warm up before they do the workout, or being able to go play with their kids on the weekend without, being blown up from that Friday deadlift session. And I was like, man, there's really something here. The approach is so unlike anything the fitness industry has ever seen. And so I just basically started writing down modules. And right before that happened, he goes, hey, barbell shrug is coming. Do you want to come up? So I drove up and I helped destroy the barbell shrug guys, and just listened to the podcast as they were talking. And, that got my brain going. And I think like 2 months later, I was going down to Mexico with my wife, and we were driving. It's the whole peninsula. So it's a 2-day drive where you just start talking, and she's like, well, what are you going to do? The gym is doing okay, but really there's like, if looking at, she's a very good numbers person. She's like, it's not enough to make a proper living. If we ever want to have a family, do this, do that. And so I was thinking, I was like, no. And like my brain had already been going. I was like, I'm going to do seminars with Julien. And at the time, if you looked at Julien, I love the man. But at that time, if you looked at Julien, you'd be like, this dude cannot do seminars. I mean, you saw him at the barbell shrug. Like he's just barefoot with like 10-year-old, fighter pants, and, just had the big belly because he was doing strongman at the time, and the big beard. And so Dea just saw like that exterior, and she's like, there's no way that, like, how is he going to go do seminars? And I was like, well, it's what's on the inside. Like the guy's brain, like he's just a genius. And so I basically started to formulate this whole thing that we're going to go do seminars about StrongFit. And so I get back to the gym in Torrance, and the first thing I did is like, I can't just go up to him and say, hey, we're going to do seminars. But I was like, hey, you have sandbags. I'll sell your sandbags. Let me take charge of that. And so I redid the whole website and started to sell the sandbags, and money started coming in. And then he started to do like the Invictus camps. And I said, cool, so what's next? And I was like, hey, so I have like these modules kind of set up, and I set it up like I basically looked at like the CrossFit model of how they do their seminar. And I was like, I think we could do a StrongFit seminar. You have enough content. And he's like, yeah, I don't think people will pay for it. I don't know, maybe. He's like, I'm doing the Invictus thing. And then, the like all that kind of started happening, and it was like, well, maybe there's a possibility. And I was like, well, I'm like, I sold my gym. So I'm really just kind of hoping that this is going to work. So I laid that on him. He's like, why would you sell your gym? I was like, I've burnt out of being a gym owner. Like, I feel like I've reached my, like, I need to impact more people. I need to help more people. And the only way we can do that is if we can help the coaches that help more people. And so I had this whole sales pitch of how we're going to revolutionize and redefine what the fitness industry, how the fitness industry views coaches and personal trainers. And that's still my goal today, is how can we redefine and educate the population about how much work passionate personal trainers, PTs, and coaches put in to help others. And so that was my whole sales pitch. He goes, all right, well, let's see what we can do. And so at that time we had Barbell Buddha coming on board, and he was starting to help out a ton, and it just kind of all culminated to us doing these seminars. So I went to Mexico and I did a couple seminars with a couple of his movement principles, and I had no name to myself, but I was just able to sell these seminars because people were interested in not just understanding the method, but truly understanding why we move a certain way. And so we came back, and that's basically how it started. We just started, people just started wanting to come to the seminars, and it was just kind of like this cult following, this niche market following that we had, and we've just been expanding it and expanding it. I think one of the coolest things was, you know, we sat down, it was a Wednesday morning, we went to the coffee shop, I showed him the entire outline. I said, I need to know where StrongFit is going, like not the business aspect, but like, where do you see StrongFit going? And he goes, StrongFit, and by StrongFit I mean it's Julien, right? Like it's his baby, it's his dream that's growing. And he goes, I want to help mental health. And I'm looking at him and I'm like, dude, we're teaching people how to deadlift with internal torque. Like, you want mental health out of this, right? Like, in my head you're like, how? I'm like, yeah, how? And so he's like, yeah, that's what we're gonna do. And I was like, you know, at the time I was like, I'm not going to say no because I want to be on board on this. So I was like, yeah, for sure, let's go do it. And so, you know, we're 2017, we did the Hong Kong. I think 2016 we started the seminars, and we're in 2020, and we're pretty good. We're getting closer and closer to help. I mean, not even getting closer. We're helping a lot of people with mental health at the moment, which is awesome. It's just that continuous pursuit to become better, and the genius that is Julien of being able to pull from 8 different sources and bring those patterns together, right? So when you look at strength and conditioning, or you look at sports science, they're so specified that they stop looking at the neuroscience aspect. Like, the sports psychologist and the strength and conditioning coach are in 2 completely different fields, which I think they're the exact same field. So why should there be 2 of them, right? And so he just started pulling from everywhere. And, you know, my mentality of just being a workhorse, he just tells me something, I was like, yes, let's go do it. And I just go at it, and I'll approach, I mean, I'll spend, you know, we have the, I don't know if we had the oblique opener when we were in Hong Kong, but I'll spend 10 hours just doing the oblique opener, figuring out every possible variation there is to that movement. And so that's where we've been able to just progress so quickly, because there's no limitations for us. We don't need to answer to anybody. We just go explore freely. And as soon as we see a thread that's going to lead somewhere, we just go for it. And so I think that's been the biggest advancement forward, is that we just don't care. You know, I think we're the rebels within the fitness industry, that we're not trying to sell anything. We're just providing pure knowledge. And that's really the biggest thing that StrongFit provides, is just, these are the principles of how you as a human learn, and these are the movement patterns that must take place, right? This is the tension that you need to be in order to do the exercise. Now, could you do it 10,000 other ways? Absolutely. Should you? That's questionable. And so that's really been kind of what we've been kind of moving more and more towards. But yeah, that's basically how I got started in StrongFit.
That's a great story. I mean, there's actually so many different routes we can diverge down now. I mean, the biggest thing for me, why I decided to sign up for StrongFit, was that, like you guys said, you were just talking about different things that no one else was kind of talking about at the time. And, you know, on an Instagram post and YouTube video, you only kind of pick up very small bits of the concepts that you guys are talking about, but it was enough to definitely interest me to want to find out more. And I'm sure we'll talk about it at some point in the podcast, but certainly I left that week with you guys with the concept of internal, external talk. And it's still like such a foundational part of my coaching philosophy now, working with athletes in the sport of CrossFit. But I mean, even just rehab, prehab with most people, fixing people, my whole, I guess, approach to diagnosing and or trying to help people with dysfunction is just completely changed. And what you think you guys made me realize is that it's actually so much simpler than the medical field perhaps makes out that it should be. You know, more than half the time, 90% of the time, it's just we're in the wrong talk and tension, and that's contributing to the incorrect, recruitment of muscle tissues, the wrong growth of muscle tissues, and then of course issues are going to arise. And so that was a massive takeaway for me. But I want to quickly just go back to your story. You know, for a knowledgeable guy who'd been in the field for a while, you know, competing in the sport of CrossFit and powerlifting, what was it that Julien did as a coach that got you so hooked and interested? What were the biggest foundational changes that he was implementing in your program design that made you think, wow, he's onto something here?
Yeah, I think the best thing was there was no program design. And that's maybe how I work. I think that we both love the chaos within it. Because I've never been a program, I can never follow a program. I'm very much a intuitive trainer or trainee athlete. And, you know, he cared for me as a person, not for me as an athlete. And I think that was the biggest thing. Like, we're family now, you know what I mean? Like when somebody truly cares, it's a lot easier to listen to them. Because I was doing a competition and I'd popped my wrist. And so I went from being able to do, at the grid, like the testing was you have to start laying on the floor and then they give you 15 seconds. And you do 2 power clean power jerks or 2 shoulder to overhead. And I was hitting 185 kilos for 2 in 15 seconds, just tap and go. And I get to the competition and I popped my wrist. And so now I'm down to, basically hitting 110, 120, which is not acceptable for what that was. And with a major chance of getting hurt. And he just goes, go home. I was like, what do you mean go home? He's like, you're not going to perform at your 100%. You're at your 20%. Doing that number isn't going to change anything because it's not going to get you anywhere. He's like, what's the point of suffering? Like, what's the point of punishing yourself while you're there? So being able for him to truly care for me as a person, for my well-being, not for the athlete to put up numbers, was crucial. Every single time, as an athlete, you beat yourself up, and there's days where you're just like, oh man, like going to train right now just sounds miserable. You know what I mean? And every time that I would leave his gym, even though I'd be so destroyed from the sleds and everything, the words he would say and how he would talk to me as a person, you would always feel better. Like I would leave his gym going like, dude, I can't wait to get to my gym and try to help people that I'm working with. Like it was just a great, every time I left his gym, I felt way better than when I was walking into his gym, if that makes sense. And I think that was really the biggest take is he never did program or anything. He would just say, hey, you need more lats. Like once we got the lats working, then it was like, hey, your glutes you can't hinge for shit. He's like, you need to learn to hinge. You're doing your entire deadlift is with your mid back. That's where your back blows up every time. And at the time, this was even before internal torque and external torque. Like he was just like, your glutes aren't doing any of it. Your back just handles all the load. And I was like, I would look at the videos and I was like, no, I see my hips are working. Like, I don't understand, but I would work at it. And, it's that ability to go, you are the coach. I'm here to learn from you. So if there's a certain trust that you start to gain, and, I would put in the work. And I think that's why he gave me so much time, so much of his time as well, is I would go home and I would, grab a barbell and spend an hour just hinging 2 to 3 inches because that's all I had, and learning to master my own body, learning to understand what my body is doing, where is the tension in my body going, why is it going there, and so on and so forth. And it's still a work in progress. I don't think I'll ever stop learning about how to master my own body, but it was that aspect that he was able to see things that anybody else would be like, yeah, you're moving fine, you're lifting the weight up, you're hitting the range of motion or the standard range of motion for the competition, you're good to go. And so I think that approach for me helped me so much more. And as a human, way more, as an athlete, it gives you hope, but as a human being, you feel like you're capable of doing so much more than what you're doing, because he's telling you what you need, not what you want to hear, which is what I see a lot of coaches do, because for whatever reason, they want to, give the athletes what they want to hear and not what they actually need to hear. And I think that's the biggest difference working with Julien has been is that we've had a very honest relationship of, this is what you need, not what you want, but what you need to do right now. And I was like, yeah, okay, fair enough. So I stopped touching the barbell for 6 weeks and I stopped doing this, and everything, performance went up.
And I
So
think,
that was the biggest thing.
I think the things that you guys talk about with regards to what you need, again, is often very simple things. And I think we as humans have just probably overcomplicated things way too much because of the amount of information out there or the different opinions we hear from different fields. But perhaps, what do you say to that in terms of the importance of just simplicity and looking at movement?
Yeah, and that's where I feel, I look, again, coming from the culinary background, like for me, simplicity is key. Like if you ever go to a real 3-star Michelin restaurant, 99% of them will have 3 to 4 ingredients on a plate, but they're the best ingredients out there, right? And they've taken time and time and time to master just a simple ingredient like a tomato or a weed or a piece of meat. They've taken so much time. So it's not the value of that, $70 plate is not the fanciness and the amount of ingredients and things that are going in there, the methods, right? It's the simplicity of how well you can make something taste. It's the knowledge in the back end that allows you to understand that you just need these 5 ingredients to have a perfect mouth, like a perfect bite. And so I think with coaching is we keep thinking that if we go shinier, meaning we always need to have progressions for exercises. We need to add bands, and then we need to do this, and then we need to go to this accessory exercise, constantly changing things. And I think that comes from a lack thereof not understanding the exercise itself well enough. So, I do assessments and I work with clients that pay me 500 euros when they come in to see me. And we literally do oblique opener, sandbag carries, and, maybe 1 or 2 other exercises, some sled work. And that's it. But I can see so much into these simple exercises because I truly understand those fundamentals. I truly understand what it takes to do this exercise. So I think as a coach, we constantly keep trying to progress, but not evolve. Meaning we always take in information, we take in these methodologies and we apply them, but we never understand the reasons behind the methodology. We never understand the fundamentals of what the movement or the training requires us to do. And so therefore, as a coach, you start to progress in your methods or your types of athletes you coach, but you as a human being aren't evolving. As a coach, you're not evolving to understanding the craft that is being a coach or being a personal trainer, right? Because what we're doing is we're providing a service, but it's a craftsmanship in that service. What experience are you providing to your clients? And for me, it's very simple. Like I don't need fancy exercises. All I need to do is I need to connect with you, and I approach training in a very different way. For me, any exercise will always be a byproduct, right? Because what we're looking for is a stimulus through the nervous system, and we're looking for proper tension in the body at the end range or at the strongest range of motion. So the exercise in itself doesn't matter. And so that's where I see the biggest misconnect is that as coaches in such a saturated field, it's a competitive field. So you're always trying to figure out what can get you out ahead. And so rather than focusing on the craft, you keep moving from thing to thing, or you keep trying to progress athletes to what they want, what they think they want, but rather than giving them what they actually need. And I think that's been the biggest things that I've been trying to change within the fitness industry is we need to focus on what we are. We're craftsmen and we're servicemen, right? And so how we provide the service and how well we've adapted our craft and how well we've mastered our craft should depend on the types of athletes you get. And it depends on how well you're able to help other people evolve, not just progress. Progress is just information that will be lost in 2 to 3 years,
So what is
right?
that? What is that difference between progress and evolution?
So let's say that you have an athlete and they have back pain. The progression would be stabilizing exercises. And then from there, like the progression in, let's say, like exercise progression, right? So like a lot of the things that I see in the fitness industry is people sell 6 week blocks of shoulders that may be bulletproof,
Mm.
right? And then from there, there's the second block and the third block. But the athlete hasn't even mastered the fundamentals in the first block. So therefore, they can't become the next block athlete. They
Mm.
haven't crossed that river yet. But yet, because since we need to continue to make money, you can't make money on such a consistent, repetitive program. People will just buy the next one and buy the next one. So as a coach or somebody that's trying to make a living, you go, well, I need progressions. So therefore, I have my 6 week weightlifting cycle, and then I need to go into my gymnastic cycle, and I need to go into my conditioning for CrossFit on season, and then that needs to be up in volume. And then now people are starting to scramble because the volume's not enough. So now I need more volume. And so you're constantly trying to progress that, which means that the weightlifting cycle never even mattered at that point because there was no mastery of that, right? If you look at Chinese weightlifters, they've been lifting since they're 2 years old. You look at Russians, they start at 8 or 9 years old. You look at gymnasts, they start super young. You look at track athletes, they spend, like we're working with the Dutch team right now, the Dutch sprinting team. They've been running since they're 10 years old. And you know what they're still doing? 100 meters and 200 meters. There's no progression past that. But they're evolving as runners to become better at that craft. So if we're looking at CrossFit, then it's like, okay, so then let's look at the sport of CrossFit. How can you evolve as an athlete in CrossFit? A great example, I think Matt Fraser is very well. Rich Froning, there's certain gaps that they do, but you know that they've evolved as athletes, not just progress. The progressive athletes would be more like a Sarah Sigmund's daughter. That's very, very talented. Sam Briggs. They're extremely well. They're extremely gifted, but they haven't evolved as human beings. And that's when you start to see them kind of slowly go down the rosters, right? And so that's what I mean is like evolving in your training means that you do the sandbag carry, and a year later you're doing the same sandbag carry, but it means something completely different, right? And it could be because the back's not blowing up, and it could be because the shoulder's not getting hiked up, and now you can walk further. But it's what you've learned doing that sandbag carry that has helped you evolve. And it's what you can transfer from that sandbag carry to a deadlift, to a back squat, to a clean, to a snatch. There's so much that goes just into doing a simple sandbag carry. But if I don't take the time as a coach to fully understand the power of a sandbag carry, how can I ever take the time to fully understand something like a snatch, which is for me, it's such a philosophical exercise. I mean, it's the amount of skill, timing, like muscle recruitment required, like the whole thing. Being able to, you as a coach, fully understand that movement would take a lifetime. Now just imagine the athlete doing it. But now not just that exercise, then you have the clean and jerk. So for me, it's that ability to evolve as a human is you no longer see exercises as the actual product, they're a byproduct, right? So what I mean by that is like I don't approach exercises anymore by I'm doing a bench press, I need to get from A to B. I look at a bench press as I need to be in a good headspace. I need to be happy about myself. I need to approach it with confidence and with love, right? And you'll notice that if you start approaching it, and this is again, I did like a whole thing of how best ways to approach things, and that goes towards that emotional mapping side. But if you ever go to a back squat and you feel sad, or you feel like it's not like, if you don't approach a back squat like it's a gangster, street fight, you see a big difference in the stimulus that you create during that exercise. So being able to grow as a human or as a coach means that things should get simpler, but the results are magnified, right? And so that constant need in the fitness world to try and become better, it's usually just shinier, not better.
Mm.
Right? So how can I make this look more professional? Not how much better am I as a coach? And I'm not saying you don't need the shiny part either, but I see a lot of shiny outlines of people selling the keto diets or selling this or selling that without actually the person becoming better, right? So like the biggest thing I see is like within the nutrition world, I see people that are selling macros, and I don't want to get into a whole fight and argument about macros and not macros, but you see people, I was seeing people that I know personally that were doing the entire macro selling and everything, and them themselves start having, you know, massive panic attacks and anxiety and symptoms of anxiety coming from it. And you're like, but you're still selling it. I would see CrossFit coaches that no longer do CrossFit selling CrossFit as a health thing, but yet their shoulders messed up and their back is fucked up and they're trying to do rehab on all this stuff, and they're still selling CrossFit as a healthy alternative to exercise.
Mm.
When they were doing their own program, you know what I mean? Like at that point, then it's just it's continuously revving the wheels without going anywhere. And so that to me is not having growth. Like I saw the gaps in CrossFit, and it's not CrossFit fault. Let's be completely truthful about this. I love CrossFit as a methodology, and I think the genius of the constantly varied high intensity functional movements is phenomenal, right? That itself is anything you want to do is essentially CrossFit. I mean, it's a genius way to place those constraints, but those constraints stopped being followed, and they became the objective of competing at your local box or competing at the worldwide level, and those constraints stop being used. So the evolvement, like the evolution of CrossFit, became a very objectivism view of how to train. So it never progressed. It's been very hard to progress that system itself.
Mm.
Right? So go for it.
I mean, I was just going to say, like, I really resonate with the, you know, the psychosocial, I guess it kind of falls in that category. You know, like, I don't think it, you know, not even just training, but like body composition, hormonal system, all that kind of stuff, 100% linked to happiness. We know that, you know, you could tick all the boxes on paper on what should be moving you forward as an athlete or as an individual towards whatever your, you know, quote unquote goals are, whether it's get stronger or be leaner. But at the end of the day, you know, if you're not happy doing it, you know, there's this like unaccounted thing that you can't really measure. That's always going to prevent you from achieving, you know, what you're potentially possible of achieving.
Yeah, for sure. And again, like that's what I was saying earlier. I hope it wasn't this one. I might be jumping different podcasts. Anywho, but that's what I was saying is, I mean, when you're supposed to be embracing that pain, people just zone out now during CrossFit because there's so much volume. They just rather not be there. And so once you stop learning the skill, meaning that once you're efficient enough at a skill, whether it's barbell cycling, double unders, like start paying attention to your clients, and half of them aren't even there doing double unders because they've required enough skill. So now they're not even present with the exercise. So they're enduring the exercise rather than doing the exercise.
Mm.
So are they really going to get the results that they need out of it? That's questionable.
Right. So I think, you know, what you're saying is half the time is that a bit more intention and presence in what you're doing and really focusing on getting the most out of exercise or an exercise or a rep or a set. And actually, like, the amounts actually needed to create the response that we're often chasing is probably 50% of what we're actually doing.
Yeah, exactly. So where is the stimulus coming from then? Because now you're just surviving. You're no longer in a fight state. You're just in the flight state. These are two different things. It's not the same thing. Fight and flight cannot be the same. Right? So if people are just in a full-blown flight state, then what are they doing there? They're just running away from issues anyways. They're enduring whatever they need to complete the task. So at that point, it's like, how do you bring them back? So like, that's something I've been doing I mean, I stopped working, not I stopped working with CrossFit. It's just I've been starting to work with a lot of MMA fighters and boxers, and that's what I do is like I look at their film. I'm like, that's exactly where you shut off. Where if you shut off in a fight, in an MMA fight, you're gonna get knocked out, right? It takes half a second and you're out. So basically, I will bring that response time back through training. They need to become present. But if they're no longer working on the skill of fighting, then what are they working on? Then they're just going through the motion. So now you're just enduring. So that brings up a whole nother level of anxiety and everything. I mean,
yeah. No, I love it though. You know, how about the difference between, you know, the process of training versus like the process of competing? So, you know, perhaps, you know, when, you know, you talked about the fight or flight state, you know, often when we're in the moment, like it's the clock's counting down 3, 2, 1, you're about to, whether it's a CrossFit comp or it's an MMA fight, you know, is there still a level of presence that's required? Or is it the fact that you've been present? If you've been present in your training, your autopilot should take over and you execute to the highest degree of efficiency? Or is that, you know, you're saying that even in the heat of battle, like there's a level of presence that's really required? Guess there is.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
100%. You can tell by their eyes right away. So like I can go, it was funny, we were at a CrossFit competition here in South of Holland, and I was looking at the girls on the about to start. It was like a assault bike and clean and jerk type thing where you go back and forth. And just by looking at the start, I called out who was going to get first, who was going to get second, who's going to get last place. And I was right. I could tell right away by how present they were right before they were out to start. So it's, and Julien talks a lot better about this, but basically there's a baseline in which we're always hovering, right? And let's say the perfect baseline would be 0, which nobody is 0. If you go up from 0 to plus 10, you're up towards the anxiety side as a driver. So you're more towards the anxious side. If you're from 0 to a negative 10, you're more towards the depressive side, the sadness side, right? And so then it's a matter of, and this is where, you know, I said, like, it's for me, being a coach is about connecting to a human being, because what I'm trying to gauge is where is your baseline running that day that I'm training with you, or on average, right? So let's say that you have somebody, if we're looking like long distance runners or CrossFitters, they're usually like at a +5, +6, right? They're usually super anxious and kind of going everywhere and never actually being able to be present with what they're doing. So what do? They pace everything because they think there's going to be another workout coming up afterwards. And even if you send them the most horrific program ever, they'll do it. And they'll be like, okay, so what's next? So can we work out again? Are we allowed to work out again? Can I do it? They keep going and going and going, right? And so then we need to see where the reaction to stress is. So maybe if we put something super heavy like the sleds or the sandbags because they suck at them, that stress, that reaction to stress is actually a negative and drives them down to crash. Right? Or maybe it's something that their reaction to stress brings them up high and gives them a panic attack.
Yep.
So then it's a matter of looking at that. So then I need to see where I can take their baseline down a little bit, because in the competition day, how are they going to react? So I invoke those stresses during training so that they know exactly what they're going to have when they're on the competition floor. But that requires them to be present and truthful with themselves. So that's been my craft that I'm working in, is I can tell exactly when somebody is present and when they're not. And I've taken people that are top level athletes. Their conditioning is far superior than mine will ever be. You know, insane amount of athletes, and we'll do 30 minutes of the oblique opener, forcing them just to create tension. And then from there, take them to engaging the psoas correctly at the end range of motion. And with those 2 exercises, they feel like they can nap. They feel like they've done the most intense workout ever because they were truly present and engaging with themselves.
It's like for long-term progress with this concept, it's, I think, you know, number one, there's a lot of responsibility that relies on the coach and education. We have this unique opportunity as coaches to, you know, essentially people coming to us for guidance. And so I guess part one is the education part. Then I think part two is, you know, the ability for people to learn how to self-regulate and, you know, embodying and understanding the principles, right? So that they perhaps don't need us there every single day to help know, you know, on your scale where they're sitting and be able to make those adjustments. And probably, I think certainly for me, in the CrossFit space, probably one of the biggest things that people are making that error on is, reading the workout as prescribed by the coach or the gym and thinking that there's only one way to do it, and, complete ignorance to perhaps how they're feeling on an emotional or physical or mental level on that day. And then 99% of the time, that's when the injury and the burnout and the illness all occur.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, for me, when I do, a lot of my clients are online. So it's always, hey, listen to your body, but I can tell if you're not getting what I want. So, within the CrossFit world, rather than me programming thrusters, like Fran, for example, I'll just be like, I need you to go all out effort. You should be done in under 5 minutes. There's no pacing this workout. And you're going to do as many thrusters as you can, as many pull-ups as possible, back and forth for 3 sets, and die at the end. And I don't care what the number is. You don't care what the number is. All I care about is that at the end, you're dead. You know what I mean? Like you have that Frank cough you have. And so when they write back to me, like, oh, that was pretty cool. And then I decided to go for a 5K run and do this. I was like, you didn't do what I asked you to do.
You didn't really do it.
So then the stimulus wasn't there. You were pacing, which is okay. Those are lessons to be learned, right? So we take the experience, we grab the good out of it, we throw it away, and then we recreate it. And so that's basically all I do as a coach. Is I never actually provide programming of sets and reps, because then it allows you to reach the objective, not to find the tension, not to find the muscle, not to find the stimulus. So if I need you to find chest, it's like, hey, every single day you're going to be doing chest work. Well, what kind of chest work? I don't know. You decide. Go read a book about it. Go online and just look up pec work on bodybuilding.com. Go find something. I don't care about the exercise. I care that the chest engages. Once we can get the chest to engage, then we can start implementing skill work to the chest. But the key is I need the chest to work in order for the shoulder to stop hurting. And so that's what I'll start with. So I'll give them a couple guidelines of, just hold dumbbells isometrically. Just get the chest to just feel the chest. Can you pump the chest? Can you contract the chest? And so from there we start working. And that's all it is. It's auto regulation based on what the client needs. So my program is never exercise based. It's never rep range based. It's usually just grab a sled today and you're going to push it until you can't push it anymore. And if you feel that you can walk around happily afterwards, that means you're going to push it again as hard as you can. Right. So for me, I always explain the stimulus that I want. I want the philosophical approach that I want out of the exercise. And that's for me, that's why I stick to very low WES exercises. So low weight bearing, low eccentric, low skill level, because that allows me to push them to the limits so I can get the neural output to come as high as possible. And then I can start to see the reaction to stress. So if I can find the reaction to stress, and when we're talking about, people that maybe are in CrossFit, fighters, runners, it doesn't matter. When you see that reaction to stress, that's the reaction to stress that's going to happen when their prediction game goes to shit, right? And you see that with CrossFitters a lot. What happens? They're looking at the clock, constantly trying to pace for a competition. Let's say they're on the competition floor and they're trying to pace a certain way for the workout, and now they see somebody going ahead of them. How are they going to deal with that stress? They weren't ready for that one, right? What about if they drop the barbell, they get no rep by the judge? How are they going to deal with that stress? Is it going to throw them into a full-blown panic attack? Like, who was the guy, Ronnie Teasdale, that threw the barbell at the judge?
Yeah, guy who wears denim shorts guy.
Yeah. Right? Well, how about Josh Bridges when he was getting no rep on those box jumps at regionals? Like, how did he react to that stress? That's what I'm looking at. How can I make those, because the athletes that you're working on, usually when they're at that level, are already very skillful. I just need their reactions to stress to become very minimal so they can continue to do and act. Those are the best dudes. Look at Matt Frazier. Look at Rich Froning. You can no rep Rich Froning all day and he'll just kind of keep going. He'll never lose his cool, right? His reaction to stress is very minimal. Jason Calippo is another great example of that, right? So if we're looking at the CrossFit world, but you see that. So like when I look at MMA fighters, I'm like, okay, so what is your reaction to stress when you think you've figured out that other guy's game and you're understanding where his gaps are, and out of nowhere you get knocked in the face? If that crashes you, meaning that it throws you way down and it forces you to disengage, we're going to have an issue, because that means that dude's going to see that hole and come and knock you the F out. Right?
I imagine, working with the majority of your clients online, that's like a challenge in itself. You talked about, something you can see what you're going to get from someone, or, the amount of presence or engagement in what's ahead of them, sometimes just by looking at their eyes or their body
Yeah,
language or their facial expressions or whatever it is, the conversation, but when you're working with people online, you don't have that, ability to see that. Sometimes
right.
all we have is, a blog or a result come through on an email. So I guess, how do you overcome that challenge? I guess it's going to come down to, you being able to really describe the stimulus and the intention of what you want to get. And then I guess an ongoing educational process.
Yeah, so it's like you said, so it's an auto regulation process, and basically they send me videos, and a lot of the times I'm looking for movement imbalances and where tension is being displaced, and that tells me a whole lot. And then I'll do certain exercises, and I say send me a video of your face. I don't even care about, like, I care about the exercise, that by looking at the face I can tell if they're doing it correctly or incorrectly. So I'll give certain breathing patterns, and I'll give certain cues and constraints to the exercise, but I want to see the face, and I can tell exactly where they start to displace their mental attention, if you will.
Okay.
And so obviously I get it after the fact, but it's a lesson to be learned for them. So if they do it incorrectly, I'll be like, okay, so let me guess, this started to happen and you started to lose it. So you decided to zone out, or you're not present enough. I need you to be present. And so it's just a matter of, I find, I don't know if you remember during Coaches Week when we were trying to teach the hinge, and I said, pretend you're bending down to pick up change and a thumb's about to go up your butt. Like, that teaches people to hinge fairly quickly. I think of stories, right? So for me, it's like, I could be as elite as possible, but if I use very technical terms or medical terms, clients aren't going to know what I'm talking about. So I keep things extremely simple, and we just talk in a very simple format. I give people stories that they can visualize, because if they can visualize it, they can replicate it, right? There needs to be an emotion attached to what they're doing, so they understand what that experience is going to be like. Because if you're constantly trying to analyze the Bergner warm-up and the 1, the 2, the 3, right? You're not actually learning. You're memorizing the positions, but when it comes to doing an amazing snatch or an amazing clean and jerk, anybody that's done one can tell you I had no clue about what position I was in. It just felt really good. That experience was awesome. Like, everything felt connected, and out of nowhere you pulled yourself underneath the bar. That's why it's so addicting to do that, to do weightlifting, because you feel that sensation and you're like, whoa, I want that experience again, because that barbell felt weightless. How do I get there again? And no technique work will get there, but it's not so much the technique work, it's you growing as a person with that barbell, right? You create the relationship with the barbell, and you're chasing that feeling constantly with the barbell. So there is a place for the technique work, but it's that philosophy, that mastering of the barbell, that relationship between the athlete and the barbell, that really counts. And so it's the same thing that I do with everything else. I can see when you're starting to disengage. And so you learn the lesson. I was like, okay, so let's go back at it and try it again. And so I give you another story, and I give you another story until one goes, that makes sense. And then you start to see the athletes actually just acting, not analyzing. If you're analyzing as you're training, you're not actually present doing the work.
Yeah. And
I'm sure you can relate. Like, the best training sessions you've had is you just start moving and the mind is fully blank. Last Samurai, too much mind, no mind.
Yeah, it's a flow state. It's kind of like the flow state that people always talk about, and it's hard. You can't voluntarily just choose to put yourself in the flow state. But I guess kind of what you alluded to at the start of the conversation, which is like, there's this other part of like being happy and just being fulfilled, that sometimes your best performances happen in those moments as well. Maybe that's not just coincidence.
Yeah, and so that starts to go into a nervous system and brain networks, and so being able to recognize when people are switching brain networks from a default mode network to an executive or task positive network, and so then I start to see that quite a bit. So I don't see it obviously, but you can start recognizing those patterns, that if somebody is constantly analyzing, they're in that default mode network where they're just basically, the wheels are revving up and there's no learning going on, because they're basically enduring everything they're doing. once they're able to switch to that task positive, to the executive network, to the active eye, then they just start going at it. Right. So, I mean, we can keep going down.
Yeah, no, I keep on that
like
path.
that,
I mean, like, I think, one thing you talked about a second ago was like the story, like, you're constantly trying to find the story that's going to work for a person. And I think it's really important as coaches, like everyone's story is going to be different. And so the one thing that you use as a cue, that, you may think this magical cue to fix someone's, third pull and a snatch, it's never the same cue that works for, more than two people. And I think the more you can make the story come from that person, and like, what was it that you were telling yourself in your head at that moment, that's probably the story that's going to stick with them forever every time they snatch.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and so it's the ability, again, the ability to relate to your client. So it goes back to how well of a connection do you have with your client to understand that, saying the third pull shouldn't be like tossing kitties over a wall, or things like that. Like, you start to find different ways, the Superman pull or the hip bump, or like you need to start to understand who your client is and how to best relate to them. And so that requires a lot more work for anybody that wants to be in that coaching, that coaching position. But I think for me, it's what allows you to always have a job, because you're the one that, no matter what, your craft will always follow you. If you're just relying on shiny methods or this, like that, and then they get disproved or something bad goes wrong, then what are you going to do? And that's the biggest thing that I see very passionate people that get caught up in trying to get certifications, and then they end up burning out. And so then why was the passion taken away? That's what we need to figure out, because it takes a lot of work to be a coach, and it's a hard job. I take on a lot from my clients. Like, I'm a very empathetic person, and so I take on a lot from my clients, but there's a passion there that I will never ever stop pursuing, that craftsmanship. And it all starts with being able to be simple.
Go back to a point that you were like, okay, we're about to go down a rabbit hole here just a second ago. Let's get back onto that track.
With the brain networks?
Okay. Go down that rabbit hole,
to me.
please. You go. Tell me about it.
Yeah. So when something that Julien started looking at was kind of neuroscience and brain networks. And so there's the passive eye, right? Or the me, which is more of like that victim mentality. There's the salience network, which allows you to recognize patterns. And there's the executive network, which allows you to act and do things, the active eye. And so basically what we see more and more is people need more of the active eye. So think of the active eye being in that fight flow state, right? In that task positive network where you're just doing the action. The salience network is just trying to figure out the patterns that are happening so they can make a prediction as to how to act. And the default mode network is there to kind of talk you out of it, to lead you to inaction, to not have any action done, because this is trying to conserve its energy. Okay, so as we start to look at that in an athlete, have you ever been in a workout where you feel like, I cannot do this anymore? And your brain starts going like, this is ridiculous, just stop doing what you're doing, this is hurting me, so on and so forth. Like, the words in the brain become very, very loud. And then there's a point where you go and you talk to yourself in third person. No, Richard, you will do this. And then you just start going. I don't know if you've ever experienced that.
Yeah,
but many times. Yeah. And then the workout, you're like, what the hell happened the last round? That was impressive. How can I do that all the time? That was you switching from a default mode network to a task positive network, to the active eye. And so in order to make the active eye stronger, we need to focus on three things. So blood pressure, temperature, and pain, right? So pain being like that of a pump. I'm not saying like pain like go punch yourself, but pain in that aspect, right? So continuing to make things hurt so that there's an actual stress or exposure therapy to it. So with those three things, you make that part of your brain stronger. So does that sound like CrossFit the first 2 years that people do CrossFit? Their blood pressure goes through the roof. They're constantly sweating like pigs because of the temperature rise. And we also have the amount of pain that they start to do as they go through the training sessions.
Mm.
And then what happens? That all becomes leveled and everything starts to become a pacing game. And so what do you see happening more and more? As that starts to happen, they start to go more towards the default mode network, more towards that flight state, more towards the anxiety symptoms of needing more volume to try and get back up to that blood pressure, to that active eye. But now everything's being paced and they think that more volume will get them back to this feeling, but it doesn't. So what do? They add even more volume until they finally burn out and they go, CrossFit isn't for me. Or they just keep living in this massive amount of pain.
Mm. So, I
So
mean, is the conversation is intensity versus volume? Is that something that's like coming into play here?
Volume, I mean, it doesn't necessarily need to be volume, right? Like you see this with regular people that come to the gym 5 times a week, but you start noticing it in aesthetics, you start noticing in mindset. So you start seeing people that have been doing CrossFit for a while and their body composition stops changing. Their muscle quality hasn't really changed. If anything, they start getting a little bit softer. They stop training as hard. They kind of start complaining about coming into the gym. Like they start going, the hardest thing is getting to the gym, where before it was like, I can't wait to get to the gym. You know, they keep trying to find solutions in a passive way. So a passive way meaning I'm going to buy your programming and the programming is going to help me get better. The programming doesn't help you get better. Your approach and your intent and how you do the programming will get you better. So
Yes.
that's the biggest thing that I do as a coach is I tell people, it's not me. I'm here to guide you. I'm like an ayahuasca guide. I'm just here to spiritually guide you to where you want to go. But I don't have the magic pill. I'm not making you better. You're the one that needs to put in the work to become better. 100%. Like I'm not trying to release all blame off of me. If you mess up, it's my fault too because I guided you incorrectly. But the person you're working with needs to put in the work in order to get the results. And so as we start to go into the brain theory, I always go into so there's a selfish brain theory. We call it the diva brain, and so it's the five steps to learning a lesson. So the first one is boredom. I'm bored. I'm fat. I need to get healthy. Okay, CrossFit is the way to go. Anxiety, second step. Ooh, I do need to do CrossFit, but I need to get in shape before I go do CrossFit. So maybe I'll start walking, or maybe right. The brain starts going. Frustration. You come into the CrossFit box. You do your first workout. You feel like you're gonna die. It was horrible. You get frustrated. The coaches are stupid. The exercises are stupid. I'm never coming back. Or you get angry at others. You start getting angry at the coach that he's yelling at you to go faster when you think that you're already going fast enough. You blame others. And then finally you realize that you're just slow and you need to become faster. What happens? You learn the lesson and now you can move forward. So if we take those 3 steps, we take the 3 brain networks, you already have a pretty basic outline of how we can actually help people on the mindset aspect of things. So that's basically what I do is, and then going back to that baseline and reaction time and reaction to stress is I just look at their baseline, I look at their reaction to stress, and then I force them to slowly start switching networks. And so as I start to get them to switch networks, now they start to understand and they start getting mad at me. And then I keep pushing the intensity to a point where, like I used to have a guy that went to the games and he was doing a workout to prep for the games at my gym back in the day. And this was before I knew all of this. This was just like intuitive training. But I'm a mean coach. And so he was doing wall balls and he had to do like 25 wall balls. And he was at like 15. And I'm like 15, 16. And I was like, no rep, no rep, no rep, 18, no rep. And he got so angry and he dropped the ball. He's like, why are you no repping me this and that? And I was like, dude, if you're at the games, you just wasted. Now you're just in 3rd place. So I invoked that stress to see where his reaction to, now I understand a lot better, to see where that reaction to stress was. That reaction to stress drove him to full like a 10. And now he can't go back to the action. Well, that's not going to be good on the competition floor. So I prepped for him. I prepped that for him beforehand. And so that's basically using the brain theory, right? The selfish brain theory, being able to understand when people are switching networks and being able to understand the baseline and reaction to stress. And that's how you can make an athlete better. The guy can do 150 wall balls unbroken, but when you no rep him for 20 of them, he loses his shit. So that's not good on a competition floor when it matters, right? And so that's again, it goes back to all the exercises are are a byproduct, right? That's a skill that you're already pretty good at. Like if you look at most medium to high level athletes in the CrossFit world, for example, they all have 30 chest to bar pull-ups. They all have their at least 15 muscle ups. They all have the clean and jerk at a certain weight. They can bar, you know what I mean? They know themselves very well and how to pace things. So then it's how do you allow them to progress from that? How do they evolve from that? You need to invoke stress. Stress coming from no reps out of nowhere. I always do my Mexican counts where I'm counting down people on reps or on, static holds. And I'll go 10, 9, 8, 7. No, nope, nope. You held your breath. We have to start back up. 10, 9, and 10 seconds ends up being 35 seconds. But that is forcing them to get out of their default mode network of just going, just fucking survive, just fucking survive. Because now I'm implementing a new random variable, which is me, which shows them that they don't have control, but they should have control. And so as soon as they start to understand that they're not the ones in control, they start to lose their shit. And then they start to go sidetracked. So again, reaction to stress. And so I go, no, you have control of your body. Your job is to hold yourself here and be present. And then I continue to count down. And so you can tell like they go through that 5 stages of the diva brain very, very quickly. And they're like, until they realize that it's them that's forcing them to be there. And then they start to learn. And so that's basically one of the approaches that I do now, more on the, just the mindset aspect of making people better.
Interesting. What, I guess that is one part of it, but what do you think? Because you're right, when you look at statistically, let's just use CrossFit as the argument. When you look at statistically on paper, what differentiates the top 50 is pretty much nothing. We're all clean and jerking, all snatching the same. They all have the same 2K row. They all have the same 1 mile pace. What is it that you think, you talked about, the ability to cope and handle stress there, but what are the biggest separators between the people? Why does Matt Fraser and Tia Kasumi always keep on winning the CrossFit Games?
Yeah, I think that his ability to handle the stress, he thrives on it. He thrives on the stress. It was the same with Froning. Like if you ever looked at Froning, he loved starting at the bottom bracket and building his way up. He needed to have something to fight for. It's like Michael Jordan. They love that stressful situation. I mean, mind you, they're freak of nature athletes, but yeah, they are able to handle themselves under stress. So what does that mean? That means that under the most stressful situations, I guarantee that if you were to do lactate tests and if you were to do like heart rate monitor testing, their heart rate would be much lower and their lactate thresholds, their lactate measurements would be way lower than most athletes. And I think that separates them, because as soon as the heart rate starts to go up, as soon as you start to go from that fight into that flight state, now the heart rate starts to go up. Now you start to freak out. Now you're ruining the pace that you were supposed to keep. And now all that stuff starts to happen and it's game over. It all snowballs.
That's got to be 2-part, right? There's got to be like a physiological, biological component that they're superior on. But then there's the mental aspect, which I think is what you keep on talking about with regards to evolving as a human being. Their ability to not allow that to impact performance is something else.
Yeah, I mean, once and we've been doing a lot of lactate testing, and it was funny because lactate is supposed to be a physiological thing, and mentally, as soon as you stressed out mentally, so we were testing the lactate, and Julien came in and we did the test, and he was like at a 0.01 or whatever, and Yaya, I don't know if you remember Yaya, Julian's daughter, was there, and she started going, I don't want to do the test and this and that, and he got livid, and within 30 seconds his lactate went from 0.1 to 5.2 or something. So he basically broke that threshold just mentally. So it has to do with both, right? I mean, we always say there's the software and the hardware, and so we have the nervous system as a whole is the software that gets the whole body running how it needs to, but the body as a hardware also needs to have its upgrades every now and then. But the problem is that we keep trying to upgrade the hardware, not the software.
For the people who are in gyms and they're not necessarily CrossFit Games athletes, but they're listening to this and they're like, maybe they're stalling with their progress and they feel like they've been doing everything they can to get stronger or get an extra chest to bar or put 5 kilograms in their clean and jerk, you know, how much, and if you would like a generalization here, how much do you think that making an improvement in like the psychological side of things and the mindset side of things in these people would suddenly, without getting any stronger or developing fitness at all more, would we see improvements in performance?
I think a large amount. I'm not saying mindset is everything, and it's not mindset. I think that you need a big enough why.
Emotional
So you need
intelligence,
a big
perhaps.
enough why. Yeah, a little bit, right? So you need a big enough why to be in the gym to get that movement.
Mm.
You know, and it's usually not. It's not necessarily like, let's say if we're talking about like to get like your first muscle up. And I always tell people, I was like, try different shit. Like, how many times do people go to the rings? Like, I used to see this at my gym all the time. People go to the rings and they do the same movement pattern, right? The same kip, the same fail, the same kip, the same. I'm like, you're just continuously teaching yourself to keep failing. You haven't tried anything new. Like, don't, just because somebody told you that you need to squat hip width apart with your toes slightly turned out, doesn't mean that's not how you should squat, right? Because everybody gets caught on teaching the squat, not how to teach that person how to squat. So the first thing that you should do is be creative with yourself and go explore every possible outcome as how you can do the chest to bar pull-up. Maybe narrow grip, maybe wide grip, maybe switch grip, maybe supinated. I don't know. Go try all kinds of things. Like, but people get stuck in that same pattern of, I'm going to get a chest to bar, but I just keep trying chest to bars.
Yeah.
It doesn't, you know what I mean? So I think it's more of that part. Is part one, you need to have a big enough why as to why you want the chest to bar or the muscle up, so on and so forth. And part two is you need to try new things.
Yeah.
Because you're just getting frustrated by doing the same thing over and over again, and that's your quitting point.
Yeah. I think you know, a level of obsession is, no one becomes extremely good at anything by not having a certain level of obsession. And people who probably fall short of their goals are just not putting enough. And this happens with athletes, I think, a lot. You probably see it as well. You know, probably just becoming too reliant on the coach to give them the answers or tell them what to do when they don't actually invest in the process themselves. And essentially, I guess, become a coach themselves. You know, they hit that ceiling at some point and then can't progress beyond it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so that's it becomes as to what are the guidelines, you know, what are the constraints that they need to get there, and then from there it's up to them to put in the work. Like, the coach can always only do so much, and you know, we always see that the coaches want it more than the athletes sometimes. So that's a whole nother realm as well, but I think the coach always wants it more, that they're willing to kind of give them what they want in a silver platter. And if there's not enough value in that, then there won't be growth on the athlete side, on the client side.
You talked about auto-regulation earlier, and it's definitely something I really resonate with, and it's definitely a message, you know, we try to get across to all of our people all the time. You know, what are the methods that you use to help teach people how to self-regulate more effectively? Like, are you looking at sleep? Are you tell them to put a Whoop band on? You know, is it just something intuitive based on your first warm-up set? And then I guess the next one is, how do you teach people to discern between whether they're just not being perhaps they're being lazy or not fired up or not being focused enough to train, and you're using that as an excuse to say, oh, well, I'm tired today, so therefore I'm going to take the intensity out of it a little bit?
Yeah, so if people want to get as much data as you want, that's great. I think it's always funny when people have the Whoop band and they slept great, but the Whoop band says they didn't sleep great, and they're like, oh, day is ruined. You're like, you just told me that you slept great until you looked at your phone. So that for me is like, your body has a way of giving you the signals of how you're feeling. Now it's just a matter of, are you going to shut those feelings out, or do you want stronger feelings? And I think that's one of the things that with StrongFit we're moving towards with the nutrition protocol and everything else, is having clear signals towards yourself. Being able to auto-regulate means that you need to listen to yourself. And that comes from not just listening to the conscious brain, but listening to the gut, listening to the heart. So auto-regulation usually comes with changing of nutrition a little bit. But it's, anytime that I have people do exercises, it's not how much weight did you move, it's not how many reps did you do, It's more of how did you feel afterwards?
Mm.
So where was the mental stress? Where was the physical stress? Where is the heart rate? You know, and how did it feel? Like if you did something and I ask you how did it feel, and you go, I don't know. Did you even do the exercise? You know what I mean? So like we were at a seminar and we had people do I like doing songs. So put on Laffy Taffy and you hold the bicep curl at the top and you do a bicep curl every time you hear Laffy Taffy. And we did that, which ends up being almost 100 curls and holding a contraction for almost 4 minutes, right? And I asked people, so how do you guys feel? And people were like, well, okay. I was like, your biceps aren't blown up? They're like, no. I was like, what were you doing? Like, you know what I mean? Like if you're holding this for 4 minutes with weight and you're doing a curl, almost 100 of them, and you don't feel the bicep afterwards, what did you feel? Like that's how disconnected you are from your body.
Mm.
So again, going back to the brain networks, then you're not there. So now we need to auto-regulate that. So then it's like, okay, so that for me, my process is always, how did you feel? What did you feel? Where's the physical stress and where's the mental stress? Because if we can't go through those 4 steps, who cares if you did, you know, an Ironman if you didn't feel any of it? Which I mean, Ironman, maybe that's a bit extreme because you need to endure quite a bit of that. But you know what I mean? Like if you're doing a bench press, if you're doing, and you don't know what you're feeling, how do you know if you're doing it right or wrong? It's not showing a problem. There's no feedback. So then what is it that you're actually working? Again, if I'm trying to get somebody that wants to have a bigger chest and I put them on the bench press and they never feel their chest, how is their chest supposed to get bigger?
Mm.
So it's simple questions like that, right? When you ask them, then you're like, well, yeah, that kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
So then it's like, okay, so what did you feel? No, I didn't feel anything. I was like, okay, so let's go heavier. If you go heavier, you should feel something. Maybe not the right thing, but you'll feel something. And so then at some point, they start to understand that they need to look internally to be able to see what they're actually feeling to be able to grow. But I think that's the biggest part of auto-regulation is we've been so disengaged from ourselves that we always look for exterior factors to tell us how we're feeling. And I think it should be the complete opposite. Your inside should tell you how you're feeling and where you need to be. And so I think I think it's a maybe too simple of an answer. It's a very simple answer,
Good.
but very, very difficult to get to. A lot more difficult than people think.
Yeah. I mean, even just on that example about like feeling the contractions, no surprise that the best CrossFitters and probably best athletes in the world, well, that's best CrossFitters more like all have an experience at some point in their life being a gym rat of doing a ton of bicep curls and developing the mind muscle connection and knowing how to contract, you know, the lat or the bicep or the tricep. It's amazing how many people, you know, I see in CrossFit gyms now, in micro and CrossFit gym as well, you know, who are very good athletes who you ask them to flex their lats or tense their calf and they still have no idea how to do it.
Yeah, it's crazy. Exactly. So I think it starts with that. I think everybody, especially in the CrossFit world, should have a posting class to teach people how to have a better connection to those muscles.
Mm.
Like, look at Sam Dancer. Poof, that dude's insane.
Yeah.
Or dancing. Dancer, dancing.
Dancer.
Dance.
Instagram is dancing. That's what
Dancer.
always throws me off as well.
Yeah. Okay. There we go.
Rich, this has been an amazing conversation. Thank you so much for sharing all your insight. I want to ask you, what does the future hold for you guys at StrongFit now? You guys are based in Amsterdam now?
We're based in Amsterdam. We're still going to be doing I'll still be traveling, doing seminars and coaches weeks and trying to educate passionate people about movement and training and nutrition and all that good stuff. We have some really big projects coming out that are online content. So, with the entire COVID thing, we had to make a slight shift. So we're writing a lot of online content. We have a podcast. So on YouTube, StrongFit, we just have a lot of content coming out. So watch out, check it out.
Amazing. Rich, well, thank you so much for the time. I mean, you just kind of gave a little shout out there as to where we can find you, but where else can we find more about yourself and what you guys are doing?
So my Instagram is Rare Barracuda. And if you have YouTube channels under StrongFit and StrongFit1 on Instagram, and I think that's everywhere. And we have a Facebook community page as well, where you guys can kind of join in and see all the different conversations that are going on. Oh, StrongFit library as well. Google StrongFit library, and we have an entire library of all the peer review articles and where we're pulling everything from.
Awesome. I'll put all these things in the show notes. I always meant to ask, actually, where did Rare Barracuda come from?
I was in Cozumel swimming, and I saw about 1.5 meter long barracuda. And in my head, I was like, man, that's a rare barracuda. When I came back home, Instagram had become a thing. And I was trying to figure out like all the cliche CrossFit hashtags. So I was like Swadkilla and Wadkilla and Gorilla Fit, and nothing was coming up. And I was like, the barracuda in Cozumel, done, rare barracuda. It just popped up. It just has a nice ring to it.
Oh, what a story. All right, Rich, mate, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. Some great conversation.
Absolutely.
And yeah, keep on doing what you're doing. Look forward to kind of following your journey on social media for now. And I guess when we can travel again over here in Hong Kong, hopefully I'll be seeing you sometime in the future.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Cool, man. I dig it.
Thanks, buddy.
All right, man. Take care.
Thank you very much.